You won't believe what you're about to hear, but the Jim Jones trial has changed significantly. Who would have guessed that Camron would reveal Chrissy's secret to the world, even if everyone believed the trial was about Jim Jones? The surprise is that the secret Chrissy tried to hide from the world is about to be revealed, and Jim Jones might now exploit it. Yes, you read correctly. This case is not just about Jim Jones. It's also about Chrissy's retaliation. What comes next in this drama is making its way into the streets and out of the courtroom. You think this is just another trial? You are completely mistaken. The consequences are unimaginable. All eyes are on the most significant trial of the year, the one that could change the course of history as the world stops and the courthouse doors open. In the middle of all of this chaos, Camron dropped a bombshell, and trust me, no one saw it coming. Accusations against Jim Jones have the potential to destroy his reputation. Although Camron is renowned for expressing his opinions and igniting debate, what he revealed about Chrissy, no one had anticipated that. Lemon, originally intended to be solely about Jim Jones and his criminal accusations. The courtroom abruptly became the center of a far larger issue. Camron made up a story about Chrissy, revealing something no one knew, a story no one had ever dared to tell. Let me explain the situation to you. During this trial, Jim Jones was the focus of attention. They knew that he had engaged in a number of questionable actions, that his empire was having legal issues, and that his reputation was being damaged. His loyalty to the crew and his financial stability were already being questioned. Deals and, of course, the infamous Die-Pete reputation that Camron and the others had built from the beginning. But something surprising happened in the trial. When Camron, in the most unexpected decision, decided to expose Chrissy Lemon's secret, the court immediately shifted its focus from the charges against Jim Jones to something else entirely. We never recognized the enormity of this. What could be worse than Jim and Cam's drama? I know what you're considering. The story really starts to spiral out of control at that point. Many individuals are aware that Jim Jones's longtime girlfriend and reality TV actress Chrissy Lemon has been concealing something throughout. In the courtroom, what did Camron reveal? Everyone was in shock after he set off a series of events. The world became aware of Chrissy's dark side and secret past when Camron accused her of engaging in some questionable behavior of her own. The spectators' gasps were a clear indication of the courtroom's intensity. Chrissy was accused of playing both sides of the dispute because she had spent so much time with Jim, participating in dubious financial transactions. He revealed that Chrissy had been covertly working with some very powerful people Jim didn't even know existed, who could destroy everything for everyone, not just Jim. But why now? Why did Camron choose to reveal this information during Jim Jones' trial? Was there a darker intention at play? Or was he just seeking to highlight the crew's misanthropes? Let's look back for a moment. For years, Jim Jones, Camron, and the other members of the Dipset have been at the forefront of the music business. Although many recognize their ability to set trends, create memorable events, and build relationships and commitment to one another, fractures were beginning to show beneath the surface. Camron and Jim had a complicated relationship, and Camron had been mute about the internal strife for years. During his trial, however, he saw an opportunity to reveal Chrissy's involvement in something even more nefarious that might have contributed to Jim's demise. This wasn't only about Chrissy's personal life either. It must be a mystery how Chrissy felt about all of this. Was she caught off guard? Did she know this strategy all along? Or is there more to this narrative than anyone cares to acknowledge? Let's take a step back and consider the ramifications of Camron's bombshell before we get ahead of ourselves, because this is no longer just about a trial. Camron's disclosure revealed more about the criminal organizations and the people working in the background. This finding might wreck everything. This is about the ultimate public test of devotion, treachery, and secrets. We must wonder, to what extent was Chrissy involved in this scheme? Who else engaged in these questionable practices? Was Jim Jones just a cog in a larger machine that he had no idea existed? Even more unclear is what this implication is for Jim and Chrissy's relationship. Will this trial result in a lasting separation that affects both their personal and public lives? If Jim has been embroiled in a scandal, was Chrissy the one behind the scenes? As the world watched in shock as Cameron's shocking revelation pushed the courtroom into a frenzy. Chrissy Lampkin, who had been Jim Jones's rock for years, now found herself at the center of a storm she never anticipated. Many questions are circling around, and we haven't even started to investigate them. But as we delve further into the fallout from Cameron's confession in court, I can promise you that things will become a lot more explosive. Let's break it down, because this is where things become really nasty. Chrissy was suddenly the subject of serious accusations after being depicted as the devoted friend who had supported her partner through thick and thin. In this instance, Cameron wasn't merely making up stories about Chrissy's alleged involvement with dangerous people and actual contacts, the kind of people who might destroy careers with a single phone call. The charge was straightforward. Chrissy had been covertly working with people from somehow. Chrissy had gotten close to the individuals from Jim Jones's past who had their own goals and had no qualms about taking advantage of situations to achieve them. These individuals weren't merely acquaintances. They were participants in the shadowy world of crime, corruption, and dishonesty. The fact that Jim was unaware of Chrissy's behavior was even more shocking. Cameron claims that Jim had been kept in the dark about her interactions with these dubious individuals and the secrets she had been keeping from him. Love and loyalty had blinded them. But finally, the truth was out. Everyone except Jim had known about Chrissy's secret existence. But before we get too far, let's take a moment to consider why Chrissy, Jim's longtime partner, would abruptly start seeing someone who could ruin him. The questions were growing more urgent. Was this all part of a failed scheme, or was there a darker motive at work? Let's now discuss the public's reaction to all of this. You have to understand that when that kind of behavior happens, fans, the media, and even the ones closest to the celebrity start to distrust the fan base that has. What do you think the fans were saying when they learned that Chrissy was reportedly involved in this situation? It was reasonable that they felt deceived and angry. Jim, the rapper, had always been trustworthy and devoted. But all of a sudden, he found himself drawn into something much bigger than he could have ever imagined, according to some with knowledge of the situation. Many fans were accusing Chrissy of using Jim as a weapon to pursue an agenda. They believed they were the perfect couple, so they had watched every move they made on reality. TV fans who had once loved the pair were shocked and upset to learn that she had been secretly working against Jim in the background while using his name and fame to boost her career. They wondered if it was a sign of true loyalty. Not to mention the media, which was constantly changing the story. Some were quick to call Chrissy a gold digger, while others accused her of being a manipulator who took advantage of Jim's fame and name for her own gain. The problem is that nobody knew the exact nature of the story. The story appeared to be evolving hourly, becoming more complex with each new detail that emerged. However, since Cameron did much more than simply accuse Chrissy, this is where everything went wrong. He began to divulge some disturbing information about Jim Jones's past that was unavoidable. Cameron asserted that Jim was not just oblivious to Chrissy's behavior, but also ignorant of issues. According to Cameron, Jim had been making poor decisions, having dubious business relationships, and hanging out with people who were using him for years. There were some who had little regard for Jim, but were eager to use him as a tool to further their own secret goals. Cameron took the audacious choice to choose names that aren't commonly associated with Jim Jones. These names were associated not only with companies, but also with illicit groups that operated secretly and out of sight. The Jim had a personal relationship with these individuals in addition to a professional one. According to Cameron, Jim had been surrounded by people who had been misleading him and guiding him in a problematic direction. Problem that was, in fact, directly outside his door. The fact that Camron went into detail to explain Jim's level of commitment rather than merely summarizing these ties is even more shocking. Jim had been involved in these activities for years, but he had never noticed it, whether this was due to ignorance, denial, or a complete disregard for the consequences. Now, let's take a moment to reflect that Jim was now dealing with the fallout from his own decisions, which had to do with the same people Chrissy had been covertly collaborating with. Knowing what was going on is one thing, but realizing that the individuals you trusted the most and were closest to were the ones who got you into this mess is quite another. Camron claimed that Chrissy's betrayal was both personal and professional, and that Jim was the one who had been tricked by love and caught up in a game he didn't realize he was playing. The worst part is that the stakes were higher than anyone could have predicted, and as the courtroom drama developed, it became evident that other wrongdoings had occurred. As the courtroom drama developed, it became evident that the stakes were far higher than a personal dispute. It was about the industry watching, the fan base in disarray, the entire empire they had built being destroyed, and the legal ramifications only now beginning to surface. It was more than just Chrissy Lumpkin's exposure for her unlawful actions, or Jim Jones's career being in danger. Actually, everyone is avoiding this subject because it was more than simply a personal mess. It was a ticking time bomb for their own life. Careers, you should think twice if you assumed this would be a fad. When Camron made the news public, the world was not just watching a couple's private affairs, but also the demise of a whole brand. Jim Jones was more than just a rapper. He was a cultural icon and a pioneer in the hip-hop movement. He was now in the midst of a legal nightmare that could change his life forever. Since the charges were actionable and not only hearsay, attorneys were on high alert. Jim's prior relationships and the dubious people who were allegedly handling the money. What this meant for Jim and Chrissy, the most obvious result was that Jim and Chrissy might face serious legal consequences. We are discussing the government. Investigations that started to emerge in connection with this issue. Law enforcement had already become aware of Jim's prior connections, especially after Camron made shocking revelations. According to those familiar with the investigation, federal agents were looking into money laundering, racketeering, and possibly even more serious criminal conduct. Regardless of whether he was directly involved in any illegal activity, Jim's ties with the wrong people and his disregard for the warning signs may have resulted in years in prison if things had gone wrong. However, there was more going on here. The industry had already begun to turn against them. Long-term collaborators were separating, labels were erecting barriers, and gossip was rampant. First, let's talk about the fallout from this controversy. The trial's effects were only getting started. After supporting Jim and Chrissy for years, companies, networks, and brands were suddenly faced with the difficult decision. Should we continue to support them when their entire reputation is at stake? For individuals like Jim Jones, who was once unbeatable in the hip-hop industry, reality set in when calls from partners and sponsors began to come in. Fearing that public opinion will eventually be felt on a huge scale, many were ending their partnerships. In fact, there were rumors that Jim was losing a lot of contracts, including joint ventures and partnerships. It was obvious to everyone around him that some of the biggest names in the business were feeling pressure. Chrissy, on the other hand, wasn't much better. The media had already painted her as the ultimate villain, and her alleged hidden life was overshadowing all of her years of commitment to and support for Jim. The public lost faith in the love tale and began accusing her of using their relationship as a springboard for career and of manipulating Jim for benefit. It was a painful series of events. Those who had earlier praised her power now saw her as a cold-blooded, cunning person who had been playing a game for years. And let's not even talk about Camron. The moment has spoke. The drama intensified. The hip-hop culture, media, and fans were all waiting for him to say something. Renowned for his biting comments and unyielding attitude, Camron wasn't giving up. He wasn't just exposing Chrissy. He was destroying everything Jim had fought so hard to accomplish. It was unclear whether Camron's actions were motivated by retaliation, or if he was protecting Jim from a reality he was unable to understand. Let's examine the options. Jim's case was more complicated. He might face indirect charges because of his ties to known crooks. Even though Jim may not have been aware of his involvement in a network of illegal activities, he had to face harsh reality that ignorance is not an excuse. However, the law does not always care. If Chrissy had been with the wrong gang, she may have faced charges of conspiracy, fraud, and possibly racketeering. These serious charges weren't minor infractions, and she could be imprisoned for years. The rapper, who was once a hero to many, had to deal with the consequences of deceit, manipulation, and secrecy. But whether they can recover from this is the real question. Is it possible that Jim and Chrissy will be able to move on with their lives, careers, and relationships after everything that has been revealed? Or is this the end of an era? One thing is certain though, Jim Jones's name will always be associated with this trial, this controversy, and these subsequent discoveries, with one of the most shocking stories in hip-hop history. While the plot, the courtroom drama, and the legal fights continue, fans are left to pick up the pieces. Only time will tell, but for now we are left with the aftermath. Now that the truth has come to light, there is no turning back. Today's concern is whether Jim Jones and Chrissy Lynn's failed business will signal the end of their career as we know it, or if the legal ramifications will be much more catastrophic than the scandal itself. And most importantly, to what degree does this fallout really exist? Since this is a developing story, please leave a comment below so you don't miss what occurs next. What do you think? Was Camron's decision to ruin Jim's career planned? Or is there more to this huge dispute than first meets the eye? If these statistics startle you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video so you can stay up to speed on all the breaking news as we continue to uncover more unsettling stories like this one. Set alerts to make sure you don't miss any amazing moments. There is much more to come, but first, thank you for your time. Keep an eye out for the next one, because in the world of celebrity drama, the real world is seldom stranger than fiction.